Spanish can join the Spanish channel. To do so, please click on the interpretation icon in your Zoom toolbar. It looks like a globe. Once you join the Spanish channel, we recommend you shut off the main channel audio so you only hear the Spanish translation. Pablo, would you be able to repeat that, please, in Spanish?
A los que recién se unen a la reunión, interpretación en vivo en español está disponible y los miembros que deseen escuchar en español pueden unirse al canal. Para unirse, haga clic en el icono de interpretación en la barra de herramientas de Zoom que ahora aparece un globo terráqueo. Una vez se una al canal de español, se recomienda que apague el audio primario para que solo escuche la interpretación en español claramente.
Thank you, Pablo.
For those of you who have joined the meeting, council is still in closed session and the meeting will start shortly. Thank you for your patience. For those of you who have just joined the meeting, the City Council is still meeting in closed session, so the regular meeting will be starting shortly. We thank you for your patience.
For those of you joining the meeting later today, or for those of you just joining the meeting, live translation in Spanish is available, and members wishing to listen in Spanish can join the Spanish channel by clicking on the globe icon on your Zoom toolbar. Once you join the Spanish channel, we recommend you shut off your main audio so you only hear the Spanish translation. Pablo, would you mind repeating that in Spanish? Again, just to restate, for those of you joining the meeting, live translation in Spanish is available for members of the public. If you wish to connect to the Spanish channel, you can do so by clicking on the interpretation icon on your Zoom toolbar. It looks like a globe. Once you join the Spanish channel, we recommend you shut off the main audio so you only hear the Spanish translation. Pablo?
Nuevamente les pedimos a los recién llegados a la reunión, interpretación en vivo en español está disponible y los miembros que deseen escuchar en español pueden unirse al canal. Para unirse, haga clic en el icono de interpretación en la barra de herramientas de Zoom. Parece un globo terráqueo. Una vez que se una al canal de español, se recomienda que apague el audio primario para que solo escuche la interpretación en español claramente.
Thank you.
All right, Madam City Clerk, it's 5 o'clock and I recognize the quorum of the council. Can you go ahead and call the roll and we'll get to our open session.
Yes, thank you, Mayor. Councilmember Tibbetts?
Here.
Councilmember Schwedhelm?
Here.
Councilmember Sawyer?
Here.
Councilmember Fleming? Councilmember Alvarez?
Present.
Vice Mayor Rogers?
Present.
Mayor Rogers?
Here.
Councilmember Fleming, have you joined us? Okay, let the record show that all council members are present with the exception of Councilmember Fleming.
Great, thank you so much. And interpreter services are being provided today in Spanish for today's meeting. Madam Zoom host, can you please explain to folks how that will work and how to access that channel?
Thank you. Again, for those of you just joining us, there is interpretation services being provided today. To join the Spanish channel, please click on the interpretation icon on your Zoom toolbar. It looks like a globe. Once you join the Spanish channel, we recommend you shut off the main audio so you can clearly hear the Spanish translation. Pablo, would you be able to restate that, please?
Ahora, para los que recién se unen a la reunión, interpretación en vivo en español está disponible y los miembros que deseen escuchar en español pueden unirse al canal. Para unirse, haga clic en el icono de interpretación en la barra de herramientas que ahora parece un globo terráqueo. Una vez se una al canal de español, se recomienda que apague el audio primario para que solo escuche la interpretación al español claramente.
Thank you, Pablo. Back to you, Mayor.
Great, thank you so much. Just a little bit of additional housekeeping. A reminder to council members to keep your audio on mute unless you're speaking. Staff will remain muted until they need to speak today as well. As members of the public join the meeting, they will be participating as attendees. That means that their microphones and cameras will also be muted and only the panelists will be viewed during today's presentations. If you're calling in from a telephone and choose to speak during the public comments portion of today's agenda, for privacy reasons, the host will be renaming your phone as resident with the last 4 digits of your phone number. The City of Santa Rosa is committed to creating a safe and inclusive environment free from disruption. We won't tolerate hate speech or actions, and we will be removing folks if they choose to engage in that. If necessary, we will also end the meeting. Now, Madam City Clerk, can you please explain for the public how they might participate during public comment and in other portions of today's agenda?
Yes. After each agenda item is presented, the mayor will ask for council comments and then open it up for public comment. The host in Zoom will be lowering all hands until public comment is open for the agenda item. Once the mayor has called for public comment, the mayor will announce for the public to raise their hand if they wish to speak on the specific agenda item. If you are calling in to listen to the meeting audibly, you can dial *9 to raise your hand. The mayor will then call on the public who have raised their hands. Public comment will be limited to 3 minutes and a timer will appear on the screen for the council and the public to see. Once all live public comments have been heard, the meeting host will play voicemail public comments. If you provide a live public comment on an agenda item, but also submitted an email, e-comment, or recorded voice message public comment, your email, e-comment, or voice message public comment will not be duplicated, read, or played during the meeting. Additionally, there are 2 public comment periods on today's agenda to speak on non-agenda matters at items 13 and 17. This is the time when any person may address the council on matters not listed on the agenda, but which are within the subject matter jurisdiction of the council. Throughout today's agenda, when the mayor calls for public comment, an interpreter will be prepared to assist anyone needing interpretation services. Those using interpreter support will be afforded additional time for your public comment as required by the Brown Act. We ask those listening on the Spanish channel but wishing to make a public comment to turn off or leave the interpretation channel entirely at the time you hear your name called so that you can join the main channel to make your public comment heard and translated into English. This icon may now look like a circle with an ES in the middle and the word Spanish underneath. You can then rejoin the Spanish channel at the conclusion of your comment to continue listening to the meeting in Spanish. Thank you.
Thank you, Stephanie. Now, before we begin today's council meeting, I do want to take just a point of privilege as the mayor and acknowledge first and foremost the pain that our community has been going through for the last couple of days, and understanding that there's likely to be additional pain that comes forward. I want to be very upfront that I have called for the resignation of the mayor for the town of Windsor, and that Santa Rosa will stand with survivors of sexual assault. And in that vein, I have reached out with the city manager and I've already discussed bringing forward an item here at the council to vet and discuss what our procedures are when we receive any type of an allegation against a staff member, a community member, or in particular, an elected official here of this body, how we will respond and how we will create a safe space for survivors to step forward and be supported as they tell just horrific stories and relive the traumas that they've experienced. I'd invite folks in our community who would like to make comments to do so during our public comment for non-agenda items. And I would invite our council members who would like to make comments to also speak during their council member comments as well. This is going to be, I think, a process for all of us to work through it. And I just want to really reiterate and express that we're here to do this as a community. We're here to support one another. And with that, I'll see if the city manager has any additional comments he'd like to make.
You know, nothing particular. I think you've covered it all, Mayor, but just for the council, we will be bringing forward a study session so that we can review this policy with you. We're looking at best practice to make sure that the policy is the most current, but we also want some public input in that process. So you will see that appearing very soon on a council agenda for review.
Great, thank you. With that, Sue, let's go ahead and do a report out of our closed session.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Yes, the council met on two closed session items. On item 2.1, the council heard discussion of the existing case of Martinez versus City of Santa Rosa. No action was taken. And the council also discussed 2.2, the steps that are being taken in terms of recruitment of an interim city manager and a permanent city manager. Thank you.
Great, thank you so much, Sue. Mr. City Manager, item 6.1.
Item, I believe you read these, Mr. Mayor. You hand it over to your colleague.
I'm gonna turn it over to Councilmember Schwedhelm, who has our proclamation today for Fair Housing Month.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. And before I do read this, I know you asked for doing this in item 10, but just feel I 100% support your position on this, and thank you for bringing it back to Santa Rosa. Let's make sure we do all the right things, because supporting victims of this type of violence, we need to be united in that. So thank you for taking the leadership position in that. And with that, it's my pleasure to read the proclamation from the City of Santa Rosa regarding Fair Housing Month. Whereas the principle of fair housing is not only state and national law and policy, but a fundamental human concept and entitlement for all residents. And whereas discrimination based on race, national origin, gender, disability, familial status, including the exclusion of minor children, religion, marital status, and sexual orientation is illegal in California. And whereas as a community, we welcome all good neighbors, recognizing the contributions and richness tendered by a wide variety of young and old, male and female, people of all colors and ethnic backgrounds, religious traditions, etc. And whereas interested parties from both the private and public sectors will participate in the city, state, and national effort to promote fair housing. And whereas the City of Santa Rosa urges all residents of our community to personally adopt the spirit of equal housing opportunity and adhere to the letter and character of the fair housing laws. Now, therefore, be it resolved that Chris Rogers, the mayor of the City of Santa Rosa, on behalf of the entire City Council, is hereby proclaim April as Fair Housing Month.
Thank you, Council Member. We'll go to public comment and see if anybody has a comment on our resolution. And seeing no hands, did we have any voicemail public comments?
No, we did not, Mayor.
Great, I'll bring it back to the council to see if there are any additional comments on this item. All right, seeing none, let's go on to our staff briefings, item number 7.
So we have 2 staff briefings tonight. The first one is 3, excuse me. We have 7.3, which is the glass fire recovery update. And I'll ask Mr. Lowenthal to provide the update this evening.
Mr. Glenn, I do not see Mr. Lowenthal on the meeting at this time.
So we will postpone that one till the next meeting, and we will move forward to 7.4, which is the water and recycled water supply update. And it's my pleasure to introduce Jennifer Burke, the Water Director, to lead us off on that. And hopefully I'm not caught with a second space.
And I do see also Emma Walton, who I think was part of the discussion as well.
They're all being promoted up as we speak.
Thank you. Good evening, Mayor Rogers and members of the council. We are here today to provide an update on our potable water and recycled water supplies. Dry year and drought conditions are affecting both our regional wholesale water supply and our recycled water supply. With me today are Peter Martin, our Deputy Director of Water Resources, and Emma Walton, our Deputy Director of Water Reuse, who will provide more detail on current conditions and the actions we are taking to preserve supplies. But first, I'll give a little bit of background information. So if we could go to the next slide, please. So this is a map of the Russian River watershed and of the Russian River, which is where our wholesale water supply comes from. Santa Rosa Water purchases roughly 95% of our water from Sonoma County Water Agency, otherwise known as Sonoma Water. Sonoma Water provides water from the Russian River and has 4 water right permits collectively referred to as Decision 1610, which allows them to divert, store, and re-divert water from the river for municipal and industrial purposes. Decision 1610 also governs the minimum in-stream flows that must be maintained in the Russian River, and Sonoma Water therefore must release water from their reservoirs, Lake Mendocino and Lake Sonoma, to meet these in-stream flow requirements, as well as to provide water supply. Depending on the type of water year, either normal, dry, or critical, determines the amount of flow required in the river. Under current conditions, if Decision 1610 was in place as normal, we would be in dry year conditions at this time. As everyone knows, last year was the 3rd driest year on record based on 128 years of rainfall data. And this year is shaping up to be the driest. So we have 2 very dry years in a row, and this has led to historically low levels in both Lake Mendocino and Lake Sonoma. If we could go to the next slide, please. We have been coordinating closely with Sonoma Water and the other water contractors of Sonoma Water to make sure that we are informed and doing everything we can to preserve water supply this year. Sonoma Water has taken a number of actions already to preserve supply in Lake Mendocino. In particular, earlier this year, Sonoma Water filed a temporary urgency change petition with the State Water Resources Control Board, asking to modify the minimum in-stream flow requirements in the upper Russian River. This request was granted by the State Water Resources Control Board on February 4th, and this allowed Sonoma Water to reduce the amount of water that it releases from Lake Mendocino, thus preserving supply in Lake Mendocino for later this year. However, the current order does run through July, and so we are expecting, if you go to the next slide, please, that Sonoma Water will be seeking approval to extend that order through the end of this calendar year, potentially, allowing reduced flows to be maintained in the upper Russian River, preserving water supply in Lake Mendocino, but also filing a new request to reduce flows in the lower Russian River, which would preserve water supply in Lake Sonoma. In order to do this, Sonoma Water is also anticipating that they'll be requesting a reduction in the amount of diversions from the Russian River. This will help preserve water supply in Lake Sonoma. We anticipate that the filing will occur next month. And as I mentioned, as part of this filing, Sonoma Water will recommend a reduction in diversions from the river. The water retailers will then likely request voluntary community-wide reductions in water use as early as next month. So we're anticipating that we will be back in front of you next month to request a voluntary community-wide reduction in water use. And then once the state acts on the temporary urgency change petition, we will then know if the state is going to require a reduction in diversions. If a reduction in diversions from the river is required, Sonoma Water will then determine our water allocations and will provide us with that allocation amount per the water shortage allocation methodology, which does take into account past conservation activities as well as local supplies. If allocations are needed and determined, we will then be back in front of the council to recommend adoption of the appropriate stage of our water shortage contingency plan. Next slide, please. So in summary, the current conditions, currently rainfall data is below our driest year on record, which was the 76-77 drought. Both Lake Sonoma and Lake Mendocino are at their lowest levels for this time of year in the history of both reservoirs. And we have been implementing a very robust multimedia outreach campaign since December, providing information to our customers and asking them to improve water use efficiency, eliminate water waste, and letting them know that we have programs and we're here to help. So with that overview, I'm going to hand it over to Deputy Director Peter Martin, who will talk to the next slide.
Yes, thank you for that introduction. Good afternoon, Mayor Rogers, members of the council. I'm going to kind of walk through just a little bit more detail on water supply and also some of the actions we've been taking, both as a region and as a utility. So this graphic here shows rainfall for the water year to date, which began in October of last year. As you can see, rainfall is well below normal for this time of year. The current driest single water year on record was in 1976, 1977, as Director Burke had mentioned, when Ukiah received just over 16 inches of rainfall. Ukiah rainfall, as you can see by this graphic, is about 3 inches below that record with no rain in sight. So for comparison, on average, Ukiah receives about 37 inches a year and Santa Rosa receives about 36. So Santa Rosa obviously isn't faring much better and also is about 39% of normal for this time of year. Next slide, please. So this graphic shows existing storage levels in Sonoma Water's Lake Mendocino. As of yesterday, Lake Mendocino was at about 36,600 acre feet, or about 44% of their target water supply curve. The storage in Lake Mendocino has rebounded a bit in response to Sonoma Water's requested relief in the form of the reduced releases for the temporary urgency change petition they filed in February. However, storage continues to fall well below those levels experienced during the most recent drought of 2014-2016. Next slide. Similarly, Lake Sonoma's current storage is about 153,000 acre feet, or 62.5% of their water supply pool operations during this time of year. As you can see, storage has been relatively flat or declining. It remains below that of the most recent historical drought. It's important to note that this is the area where Santa Rosa Water derives its water supply as a contractor in the lower watershed, and typically Lake Sonoma holds about 3 years of water supply storage. Obviously, that takes on greater urgency as we're in the second year in a row of dry weather. Next slide. All winter long, we have been coordinating on a regional level with the Sonoma-Marin Saving Water Partnership and a regional awareness campaign.
Thank you.
The Sonoma-Marin Saving Water Partnership represents 12 water utilities in Sonoma and Marin counties that have joined together to provide regional solutions for water use efficiency. A dry year campaign has been ongoing to ensure consistent messaging that directs the public to water saving tips and programs and rebate offerings that are available from the participating agencies. Obviously, you can see more information can be found on savingwaterpartnership.org. Next slide. You may or may not recognize this It's a Dry Year, Save Water With Us campaign that has been ongoing for several months now. This outreach platform offers quick tips and a unifying message that we've been using throughout the region. The partnership and Santa Rosa Water have been using the branded campaign, digital advertising, social media platforms, and have enjoyed a positive response from the public. Next slide. I also wanted to focus a little bit more on some of the activities of Santa Rosa Water and our water use efficiency staff throughout this winter. Since December of last year, we've been really active in both our external and internal outreach throughout city departments and the community. Monthly radio spots on Wine Country radio station in English and Spanish are still ongoing. We have created a significant social media campaign and utilized weekly electronic communications through the City Connections newsletter. This last fall and winter included a complete overhaul of our WaterSmart web pages to create a much better user interface. And it was all based on customer feedback we've received over the last few years. And we've been utilizing bill inserts to get the word out about dry weather preparations and water use efficiency program offerings to our customers. I do want to share some positive news amongst all this, is that the messaging is starting to work. Our community is historically very responsive when they start to become aware of drought conditions. Last month, we saw a 17% decrease in water use in March compared to last year. Our customer call volumes in the water use efficiency hotline were up 400% month to month just this last month. And we've already seen a 30% increase in pre-qualification requests for our Green Exchange program, which provides rebates to customers for every square foot of turf removed on their property. Next slide, please. The outside of our bill envelopes were branded with our WaterSmart program logo as well, and directed customers to our webpage and water use efficiency hotline. Next slide. And then I just also wanted to point out that we're using a new tool, sort of high tech, in assisting our customers in finding leaks and responding to water waste complaints. We saw a large uptick last year, as we often do during a drought, in water waste complaints. And we've been utilizing automatic meters to look up customer billing data that is collected on hourly increments, allowing us to follow up on cases of what we call continuous use, which is indicating that there is a leak in a home or a business. Those accounts are flagged by the water billing staff for follow-up by a water use efficiency team specialist. Most customers don't realize that they've had a leak. They just assume their bill is high and sort of move on. The water use efficiency team can contact them and review their water use history and find leaks. I just want to provide you with two recent examples. One was a large institutional customer, a school. Working with that customer, our staff helped identify 4 large leaks, including in their irrigation system, 2 water process leaks, and a service line fracture, with an average saving of 27,000 gallons per day. We also had a commercial customer at a strip mall. Many of the buildings had been vacant due to the COVID-19 pandemic. They found a toilet leak that was wide open in a vacant building on their property campus, and the average savings were 5,200 gallons per day. Next slide. So also, I just wanted to point out that we'll be utilizing our planned Earth Day event to distribute our WaterSmart kits to our customers and community next week. Unfortunately, this will be a drive-up only event due to the county health order restrictions on public gatherings. Please be assured that city staff did explore all options in making the event a walk, bike, and roll event, but this was not possible due to pandemic and health-related concerns. Staff was directed that the event only could occur if it was a drive-through, and that participants must remain in their vehicles and wear a mask to prevent the spread of COVID-19. For those that can't attend in person or prefer not to drive to the event, we're providing virtual Earth Day celebration options for the entire week of April 19th. Next slide. At the event, Water Smart toolkits will be handed out, which include flow bags, dye tabs, and additional water-saving resources for our residents. In addition to those Water Smart toolkits, the city is offering an eco exploration guide for kids with some reusable items like a stainless steel water bottle and reusable sandwich bags. Staff have continued to be mindful in selecting items that go in these kits, just as they have been for previous in-person Earth Day events in Courthouse Square. Information online can be found at srcity.org/Earth Day. And next slide. So you heard a little bit from Director Burke about some of the things that are ongoing with Sonoma Water and our partners. Just kind of want to recap some of what the next steps and some of the preparation that we're doing. We're continually preparing for this critical situation, and we'll ramp up our conservation messaging and activities over the next few months. As we are now moving on from calling this a dry year and characterizing it as a drought, that message will take on greater urgency. Santa Rosa Water is working with Sonoma Water and its contractors to update the water shortage allocation methodology, and which will help the contractors to better understand cutbacks and deliveries this summer after the temporary urgency change petition is approved. This will also allow staff to better be prepared to formally launch the city's water shortage contingency plan based on those anticipated cutbacks and potentially institute prohibitions and mandatory restrictions. As Director Burke mentioned, those will likely occur in June or July. And in the meantime, Santa Rosa Water will return next month to the City Council the recommendation for a voluntary community-wide target for reduction in customer water use. This will likely coincide with Sonoma Water's filing of a temporary urgency change petition. And next slide. So in conclusion, I just want to say we are here to help. The Santa Rosa Water Use Sufficiency contact is srcity.org/watersmart, or the phone number there, 707-543-3985. This will conclude my portion of the presentation, and I'll hand it off to Deputy Director Walton for a recycle water update.
Thank you, Deputy Director Martin. Good evening, Mayor Rogers and members of the council. I am Emma Walton, the Deputy Director of Water Reuse Operations. I oversee the operations and maintenance of the regional wastewater treatment plant, as well as the recycled water distribution system. Like our potable water supply, the production and availability of recycled water has been severely impacted by the lack of rainfall. Next slide, please. I'll start by providing a bit of background. Our wastewater treatment plant produces on average about 7 billion gallons of recycled water per year, which gets beneficially reused throughout the region in a number of manners. About 2/3 of our reuse capacity is provided by the Geysers recharge system. We also provide recycled water to urban customers in Santa Rosa and Roanoke Park. And about 1/3 of our water we produce each year on average is provided to our agricultural irrigation customers. Our goal is to reuse 100% of the water that we produce each year, which we typically achieve. But in years where we receive a lot of rainfall, we produce more than our storage allows us to hold, and we are permitted to release this highly treated water to the Laguna de Santa Rosa. Next slide, please. On the other end of the spectrum, in years where we don't receive much rainfall, like the last 2 years, we have to cut back what we are able to deliver to our agricultural users. We do everything in our power to make as much water available to our ag community as possible, but unfortunately this year we just don't have the water. In the beginning of this year, we underdelivered on our contract to send water up to the Geysers in order to build up a bit of storage as we go into the irrigation season. However, we will have to make up this water at the end of the year. Windsor, who also contributes flows to the Geysers system, has been over delivering on their contract to offset what Santa Rosa is required to deliver. However, Windsor is only able to do this for a bit, and they will be having to cut back on what they're sending here in the near future. Sonoma Water also produces recycled water and has been able to transfer to us about 20 million gallons, which compared to what our plant produces is a small amount, but we are looking for every little bit to help our ag community and make as much water available as we possibly can for our ag customers. In early May, we will be shutting down the Geysers pipeline for a 30-day shutdown to perform routine maintenance and do repair work on the pipeline. This shutdown will allow us to gain a bit of additional storage, which we will make available for the ag community. And then lastly, anticipating back in December that the availability of recycled water would be very limited this year, we did not provide any recycled water for frost protection to make as much available for irrigation as possible. Next slide, please. This year, we are anticipating that our plant, or we will have about 5.1 billion gallons of recycled water available for reuse. This is compared to, on average, about 6.7 billion gallons that we make available for reuse. 4 billion of this will go to fulfill our contractual obligation to the Geysers. We are allocating 6 million gallons for agricultural irrigation use, and 500 million gallons will go toward our urban contracts. It is important to note that that the contracts that we hold with the Geysers and our urban users are uninterruptible. If we underdeliver on our contracts, we are assigned penalties for that. In average years, we are able to provide our ag customers with 100% of their recycled water needs. However, given the lack of rainfall, our recycled water production is at an all-time low, and we'll only be able to provide a fraction of what they need. As you can see, on average, we provide about 1.7 billion gallons. We're only providing 600 million gallons this year. Next slide, please. Our recycled water production is tied closely to rainfall. You can see here our production for the last 20 years shown in the dark blue line. It trends very closely with rainfall, which is shown in the light blue line. This year, due to the lack of rainfall, our plant flows and our recycled water production is substantially below average, as you can see all the way on the right-hand side of the graph there. Next slide, please. Not only are we substantially below average, we are actually the lowest we have ever been in 35 years of record. The light blue lines show the last 35 years of production from October through September. As you can see, it's extremely variable, but for reference, the gray line in the middle shows the average production in any given year. Last water year, so October 1st, 2019 through September 30th, 2020 is shown in the dark blue line. It was our previous historic low for production, and it was a very hard year for our ag community as we were only able to provide them about 70% of their historical usage. This year, you can see we are trending well below last year, shown in the black line along the bottom there. Next slide, please. So here I've simplified the graph to just show the maximum, the minimum, the average, and the current production. It shows our average daily production for each month. We ended March with an average daily production of about 16 million gallons per day. On average for March, we would expect to be producing nearly 25 million gallons per day, so well below average. The area under this production curve, this is a production curve, not a storage curve, so it's the area under the curve that becomes the volume that's available for reuse. So I'll show that now. Next slide, please. So in a given year, we have nearly 5 billion gallons that we have to set aside for our uninterruptible obligations. So that includes geysers, our urban irrigation, and what we lose to evaporation. Next slide, please. That leaves, on average, a little over 2 billion gallons to be made available for agricultural irrigation, or if we need to discharge. Next slide, please. As you can see this year, we have very little available for ag use. The lack of rainfall has just severely impacted what our plant has produced. Next slide, please. Besides the production of recycled water, the other metric that we track closely is storage. And not surprisingly, our storage is the lowest it's ever been for this time of year. However, given our efforts in under-delivering to geysers, over-delivering by Windsor, really working closely with our regional partners, we have been able to gain a little bit in storage that we would not have otherwise, which is really important for our operation and really important for our users because it gives us a lot more flexibility in when we're able to make water available for our ag community. It allows us to have our customers use water in a manner in which they find most productive. So some of our users will use all of their allocations very early on in the seasons, while others will want to spread it over the course of the irrigation season. And gaining this storage has allowed us to make those options available to our customers. Next slide, please. Lastly, I just wanted to touch on our outreach efforts. We do realize that the limited irrigation supply of recycled water is and will be very impactful for our customers and to their businesses. And we really have prioritized getting the word out early and frequently and over as many platforms as we possibly can to make sure nobody is caught by surprise and that they can plan accordingly. We've communicated through emails, mailed letters. We have an e-newsletter that goes out monthly with updated production and storage curves. Similarly, we update our website frequently with updated production and storage curves. Our staff are always out in the field communicating with our customers, having one-on-one conversations. We've made personal phone calls to all of our frost protection users to make sure that they were aware well in advance that we wouldn't be providing frost protection and that they needed to put backup efforts in order. We have auto dialer calls that go out that notify our customers when important communication has been distributed. We're doing regular updates to the BPU. We're now in front of the council providing a second update to you as well as email updates. We hold ag user meetings. This year we held virtual ag user meeting. We held one back in January, which was the earliest we had ever held one, just to give people a heads up. We just held another one last week to provide more detailed information as we begin the irrigation season. And we hold monthly meetings with the Farm Bureau to make sure that they are aware and all of their members are aware as well. And with that, you can move to the next slide. And I just would like to thank you for your time, and we'd be happy to answer any questions.
All right, thank you, you three. Councilor, are there any questions? We'll start with John.
Thank you, Mayor, and thank you, Ms. Walden. I'm curious about our contractual obligations and when they may be up for discussion, assuming that we are approaching a new normal. Maybe not, maybe we are. It could go the other direction. We don't really know. But I'm sure that we have different timelines on each of these contracts. What might we be kind of having some serious conversations about changing some of the language in those contracts to accommodate or to respond to what may be our new normal in rainfall?
So our contract with the geysers, which is where most of our water is allocated, is through 2037. It is a very important contract for us in our operation. We rely heavily on this contract to reuse water in high rainfall years. We would not be able to withstand a year even of average rainfall without discharging if it were not for the Geysers contract. So in years like this year where we have very little amount of water, we are able to kind of pare back on what we send to the Geysers as that contract does allow us to vary the flows slightly, which we will do to make sure we provide as much water to ag as possible. But in years where we have very heavy rainfall, we absolutely need that contract and rely heavily on that contract to make sure that we're beneficially reusing the water. And as we move into kind of this new normal, we do need to plan for not only these low water use or low water production years, but also on the contrary, very high water production years.
Great, thank you. Okay, any other questions from Eddie, followed by Victoria?
Yes, thank you. Team, thank you for the presentation. I had a question about Windsor lending a hand to Santa Rosa. How were they able to produce the surplus, or is their level that they must meet is lower than ours because of population? If you can elaborate on that, I would greatly appreciate it.
Yeah, no problem. Great question. We have Windsor has a connection to the Geysers pipeline, and we have a contract with Windsor through which they provide water, and whatever they provide can offset what we need to provide. Windsor is a much smaller recycled water producer than we are, and they have less opportunities for reuse than we do and less obligations for reuse than we do. And even in low water production years, they typically have to discharge water to the environment. So they aren't able to reuse 100% of their water on any given year. So seeing that we were going to have a very low water production year, we knew we would have additional capacity for them to utilize. We worked with them early on to get them to help and commit to over delivering. It helped with their operations so they don't have to now discharge water to the environment, and we can instead offset that and reuse it for our agricultural use.
Thank you.
All right, Councilmember Fleming.
Thank you. Yeah, this question is for you, Ms. Walton. How could we evaluate contracts for agricultural uses going forward in a way that honors our climate goals, our Tier 1 climate goals, meaning that if we continue to have limited availability to agricultural users, or frankly, even if we don't, could we prioritize agricultural users that focus more on non-livestock based agricultural production or agricultural production that is lighter on the environment or perhaps even restorative towards these ends?
That's something we can definitely explore. We spent the last few years negotiating the contracts that we currently have with our ag users. We agreed to, given that it's an interruptible supply of water, we did agree to a 12-year term on our contracts with our ag users. So we would have to satisfy the years, those years before we could reopen that for discussion. But it's definitely something we can look at and consider as we renew those contracts.
Okay, it might be something that we might be able to look at just setting a policy on in the interim while we await the expiration of those contracts and we see if this is our new normal or if it's just a drought season. Thank you.
And if I can just add, Mayor and council members, all very good questions. All work that we have done and worked very closely with the Board of Public Utilities on. As Deputy Director Walton mentioned, we spent about 2 years working with our agricultural community on what their needs are and interests and contracts and really looking at that. We are happy to, if there's interest, come back at some point with a study session to provide more detail and in-depth information, in particular on the recycled water piece, if that's of interest. So if you'd like us to do that, let us know and we'd be happy to do that.
Great, thank you. So seeing no other hands from council, let's go to public comment on this item. If you're interested in providing a public comment, go ahead and hit the raise hand feature on Zoom. All right, Madam City Clerk, I'm not seeing any hands. Do we have any pre-recorded voicemail public comments?
No, we did not, Mayor.
Okay, I'll bring it back to council then. Any last thoughts from council members? Great. I just want to say thank you to the three of you. I know it's a particularly dry year and we'll be talking quite a bit about this, and that's a lot of information for us to absorb. So thank you for keeping us up to date. We'll talk with you soon. Okay, Mr. City Manager.
So our last staff briefing tonight is item 7.5, which is Bennett Valley Golf Course Study Update. And Assistant City Manager Jason Nutt is here to do the presentation.
Good evening, Mayor and council members. I am here to talk to you briefly about the Bennett Valley Golf Course Ad Hoc Committee and give you an update. Councilmember Sawyer did provide an update on the 23rd of March. Based on that update, there was a request that we actually come forward with an item such as this, where it's agendized and where council members may have an opportunity to provide additional input. Next slide, please. So as a very quick update, what I wanted to remind you is on February 2nd, staff came forward during a study session and provided council with a study concept that we wanted to consider evaluating. Because of some of the significant capital and operational costs associated with the golf course, we felt that there could be interest and could be value in conducting a study that would determine whether or not making minor land use shifts from the golf course could benefit the golf course financially in the long run, as well as potentially providing some additional capital to invest at Bennett or at Galvin Park. We didn't at that time make any indications that we would be looking at developing the entire property of either the golf course or Galvin. We have seen a number of emails come back to us, as you may have as well, that there was some confusion in the community, and I want to make sure that everybody is on the same page. That we have not made such an indication that we would be studying that, but instead we might be studying taking portions of the golf course, such as the area around the driving range, in an effort to create additional revenue so that we can provide further investment into the golf course itself. Council, while not taking specific or directive action, did provide generalized guidance that suggested there was interest in having staff proceed with that study. Following the council meeting, there was a number of, we received a number of emails, phone calls, and a general feedback from the public that was not favorable to that study, as most of you received many emails and calls. Next slide. In response to that feedback from the community, Mayor Rogers appointed an ad hoc committee made up of Councilmember Sawyer, Councilmember Alvarez, and Councilmember Tibbetts. That was to be chaired by Councilmember Sawyer. And the purpose of that ad hoc was to develop a scope of work that was associated with the land use changes at the golf course for the purpose of supporting future capital and operational improvements at the golf course. It was because we had originally come forward in the study session with a recommendation that we use an existing consultant that had experience working with municipalities associated with land use changes at golf courses. That was part of the substantial concern we heard from the community members. Council suggested through the mayor that we go with a more open process where we would create a scope of work, that we would put it into an RFP, and then we would do an open solicitation so that anyone who had the relevant skills could provide us with a proposal on that particular study. Next slide. We held our first meeting on the 9th, and During that meeting, we discussed the significant community feedback. We talked at length about the various comments that were being provided to council members as well as to staff. We talked about some of the meetings that the council members and staff had attended in regard to this particular study request. And the ad hoc committee very quickly unanimously agreed that at this point in time, given the significant concerns that we have going on throughout this community, that it didn't seem appropriate for us to proceed with a real estate oriented study. Instead, the ad hoc committee made the suggestion that we should move forward with an operational analysis that really looked at a number of critical components, such as making sure we look at how we might be able to refinance and prepay our bond debt, looking at whether or not we had other options to deal with the deferred and long-term maintenance, how we might create and construct a propose or a solicitation for a new operator that might make alternative revenue options available to the golf course. But ultimately, the ad hoc suggested that we needed the golf course enterprise to, in essence, be self-contained and to pay for itself. And so there was interest as part of this other study to make sure that we looked at all possible opportunities outside of dealing with real estate to come up with a mechanism and a series of proposals that would ultimately allow the golf course to be a self-financing operation. Through the course of that conversation, Councilmember Tibbetts was also appointed to liaison between the staff and the Save Bennett Valley Golf Course Steering Committee, which is a group of community members from the community initiative that is pushing us to not make any substantive changes within the golf course itself, that they've decided to create a committee among their group of individuals who have experience with all sorts of different aspects of needing to manage a golf course, whether it's individuals who have experience being a part of a golf course, whether there's financial advisors that are a portion of it, whether there's legal staff that are in the community that are providing information, but they've created their own steering committee, and it seems appropriate for the city staff to work closely with them to not only just understand what they're doing, but to make sure that we're able to provide them with adequate information that would allow them to present back to the ad hoc or to the council a community-driven response to the operational health of the golf course. And Councilmember Tibbetts was identified as being a liaison for that activity. Next slide. The ad hoc had two additional meetings on March 31st and on April 6th. During those meetings, we recapped what the ad hoc committee's expectations were. That really was following some additional follow-up meetings with the mayor to determine exactly how we were to report back to the city council. As I mentioned, Councilmember Sawyer did provide a briefing to the council during council member briefings on the 23rd, and there was an expectation that we would come back with a time where other council members might have the opportunity to provide additional comments or feedback, and an opportunity for the public to provide feedback because the item would be agendized. Thus, we're with the staff briefing today. During that same meeting on the 31st and on the 2nd, we also discussed with the chief financial officer where the bond debt is, how it's organized, some of the history with the bond debt, some of the potential options that we may want to explore relating to the bond debt and the restructuring of the bond debt. And then we also talked about some staff conversations that we had with a couple of golf consultants that approached us following a series of community meetings with the community group. And had some great conversations with them, but wanted to make sure that the ad hoc understood what those conversations were about, what kind of consultants exist out there, and whether or not they might be just interested in taking on the operational aspect and looking for the RFP that we'll be sending out next year around this time, or whether it was somebody that actually could provide us with support as we go through this upcoming solicitation to figure out what that operational proposal should look like. Then we also discussed how we've been interacting with the Save Bennett Valley Golf Course Steering Committee and how those conversations have gone. That committee has made a request for a substantial amount of documentation, and staff has been working hard for the last several weeks to try to accommodate and pull that information together. And we wanted to provide a briefing to the council members in the ad hoc as to those efforts. Next slide. For next steps on this, later this month, we are meeting with the ad hoc members to do a tour of the golf course with the idea that we would be able to demonstrate and show them some of the areas of capital concern, some of the areas of operational concern, so that as we get into this development of the scope of work for the upcoming solicitation relating to the operational analysis, that they have a clear picture and understanding of what those concerns are. Then later this month and into May, we're going to be finalizing that scope of work with the idea that we would be able to come back to council at the end of May or early June to get approval on that scope of work and approval to release the solicitation to the community of consultants at large. We haven't gone further than that to determine exactly how we would go through the process of selecting or interviewing those potential proposers. And we would expect that that'll be in some of the upcoming meetings that we would talk in more detail about how we might go through that process. Realistically, what we're expecting is based on the mayor's original proposal for the establishment of this ad hoc committee, we would be looking to probably conclude operations of the ad hoc in June once we've completed the solicitation for that operations analysis. And with that, Mayor, council members, that concludes my presentation, and I'm available to answer any questions.
Great, thank you so much, Jason, and thank you to our ad hoc members and community members who have engaged on this topic. Councilmember Sawyer, you're chairing the ad hoc. Do you have anything that you want to add, or do we have any questions from council?
No, and Mr. Nutt did an outstanding job of recapping not only our meetings, but the community input and our discussions of late. So I don't think I could add to that. It's really outstanding, Mr. Nutt. Thank you very much. It has been a tumultuous few weeks, no number of weeks, as many council members may have experienced with the community input, very important community input, and it helped guide the subcommittee. So, Mr. Nutt, again, thank you for an outstanding report.
Councilmember Sweatham.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Thank you, Jason, for the presentation, and I'm very appreciative of the subcommittee and the direction that it is going. Some questions I do have that I brought up during the initial presentation. Mr. Nutt, when did we incorporate the capital improvement fee, the $2 for 18 holes, $9, or $1 for 9 holes? When was that implemented?
I believe that was in around 2018, but I'd have to get the exact date to you at a later time. We haven't really spent a lot of time talking about the capital fee yet.
And as we talked at our last presentation, how much of that money actually has been invested in any capital projects in the golf course to date?
There hasn't been a substantial amount of investment. What we've done is try to accumulate those funds in an effort to put it towards the larger impacted capital improvements, such as the irrigation system. And because we're gaining about $80,000 a year from that revenue stream, and we're looking at roughly about a $2 million irrigation replacement program, we've really been very careful to not spend that money out. We've had a number of conversations with Bob, the current operator, relating to other activities that we might be able to use it with. And we continue to walk through some of those other projects to see if they're appropriate for us to spend this funding source on.
So I guess the disconnection I have is that being on council, then we said, yes, there's going to be additional fees, but it's going back into the golf course, and not hearing, if that fund is sitting at $250,000, and I have received information, there are some things that could go into the capital improvement of the course paid for by those that use that course. And so who makes that decision, and does the ad hoc have that, or how do we actually make some of those investments? And I totally get what you're saying, the long-term strategy, but that was not shared with us in 2017 or 2018, that we're going to wait until we get 2 million, 5 million. It seems like a little bit of disconnect for those, who we're committed to improving the course, and we haven't really done that what we said we were going to do. Can you comment on that?
I certainly understand that, council member. It is not the ad hoc committee that has charge of distributing these funds. It is with staff, and that ultimately falls to me to be able to approve those expenditures as they go out. At this point in time, the type of projects that have been brought forward by the operator, we don't feel we're appropriate to go forward with the expenditure, or we found alternative sources to make those investments, such as the deployment of new tees throughout the golf course. We had at one point talked about utilizing the capital funds to make that investment. We did find another opportunity or another funding source to invest for those. But I certainly understand your concern, and we do have those discussions with the operator on a monthly basis. But ultimately, it's my call as to when those expenditures are made.
And is there a possibility that we could see what has been asked for? Because again, I'm getting calls and comments from community members, and I've even heard from the operator saying some of the equipment's from the 70s, and we could parcel it out. And if we're not improving that, again, that disconnect. So actually, it would help me if I could understand. Here's what's being asked for. Here's what we've approved. Here's how much is left.
Councilmember, I'd be happy to share that with the council, but I don't think it's appropriate to go through that list at this point in time.
Great. It's just, again, I think council, it would be helpful for continuing conversations with the community to understand that. So thank you for all your efforts on this.
Understood. Thank you.
Madam Vice Mayor?
I just want to thank the Ad Hoc Committee for their participation. Due to the community outpour that we received, thank you guys for taking on this committee. And also I wanted to just put out that I've driven by, but I've never really had a tour. So if there is a tour and you guys are open to council members attending and going, I would love the invitation to see like really what all the fuss is about, like what we're talking about, right? So I really would like to just get out there and see it firsthand, the gym that we do have in the community that I've heard so much about. Thank you.
Vice Mayor, I'd be happy to schedule a time to take you on a tour so that you can see these.
You also can go on their website and schedule a time as well. Go ahead, Councilmember Tibbetts.
Thank you, Mayor. One thing that the ad hoc also discussed at our last meeting that I wanted to bring forward as a potential option for the council to consider is at some point in the future, I don't know if it would be discussed tonight or at a future meeting, but we felt that it might be a good idea to transition the ad hoc to a subcommittee when we started deeply developing the scope of work so that the public had a way to directly provide input, particularly on that important document. Whereas right now I am acting as the liaison. I am interfacing with two individuals, Philip Lederer and Dick Carlisle, and they've been awesome to work with. But, I think it might be prudent to start thinking about how the public has access to this conversation.
And Sue, if you can weigh in on that point, I believe ad hocs, they don't have to have public involvement, but they can have public involvement, correct?
That's true. There's nothing that would preclude an ad hoc from opening themselves to the public and to comply with Brown Act requirements if it so chose.
Yeah.
Okay.
So I think I'll leave that to the chair. I think if the chair, if in consultation with the ad hoc is interested in that, I think you have the mechanisms to do it. So, Mr. Chair.
Thank you, Mayor. And I agree with the concept. What I'd like to be able to have is solicit information at the right time. So especially when we are looking for an RFP and make it to help have the community, the golfing community come forward, especially through our liaison and perhaps, because I know that the golfing community is feeding information to those gentlemen. And then they are using Councilmember Tibbetts as a conduit back to the task force. So as we move down this, go through the process of developing some of the elements of an RFP, that would be an excellent time to, if nothing else, to have a check-in with our community members to make sure that we're covering some of the bases that maybe we missed. Or on the other hand, they running it by them and they bless it as being a very comprehensive RFP. So I think that getting that input will be important. And it's just a matter of when, what the timing might be. But I see that as not too far out on the horizon.
Great. Let's go ahead and go to public comment on this item. If you're interested in speaking, go ahead and hit the raise hand feature on your Zoom. And I'm not seeing any hands raised, so let's go ahead and go to our voicemail public comments.
Mayor, we received no voice message public comments on this item.
All right, I'll go ahead and bring it back to the council then. I guess that means that the ad hoc's doing a good job of working with the community and getting that public comment up front. So I appreciate everybody's work on this, and I'm looking forward to more information coming to the full council, it sounds like in potentially June. Okay, with that, we'll go ahead and move on to our next item. Appreciate it, Jason. We'll go to city manager and city attorney reports.
Nothing to report.
Okay.
And nothing to report on my side either. Thank you.
Great. So we'll go to item 9, statements of abstention by the council members. Councilmember Tibbetts.
Thank you. Let me pull out my notes. I think it was the January 26th meeting. I need to abstain. I wasn't present.
Okay. Are there any other statements of abstention? All right. So noted, council member. And when we do that item, we'll reflect you as recusing from that item. Number 10, mayors and council members reports. Who would like to start? Go ahead, John.
Thank you, Mayor. And did you want us to weigh in? I believe you did on your intention to bring forward our policy regarding this unfortunate behavior that was witnessed in Windsor. Did you want us to weigh in on that proposal?
I wanted to create a space so that folks can speak if they would like to speak. If you have input that you'd like to provide, now is definitely the time.
Well, I just want to say thank you for bringing it up, because of all the issues that I have been hearing about personally, just people that come up to me and ask me, in essence, how did it take so much time between the report of certain behaviors and then action? And I simply couldn't answer the question, and I was befuddled in the same way that they were. And I think that your willingness to clearly state to the community what we would do as a council in one of these very unfortunate circumstances that I hope we never have to face. I honor that effort, and I look forward to that meeting so that the community knows what to expect if those kinds of allegations or behaviors were identified in the future. So thank you for that, and I support it wholeheartedly. And now I'll give my report. The Economic Development Subcommittee met today, and due to a request from some labor advocates, we reviewed some language, and actually this was some language that was proposed for a Petaluma ordinance for the right to recall and right to retention ordinances. We had a very lengthy conversation about it. It was very satisfying conversation, because our particular subcommittee has a rather informal way of communicating, and it lends itself to great conversation, not only amongst ourselves and staff, but also the community. And we had some community members call in as well. And we ended with a split recommendation in favor of bringing the items to a study session with the full council regarding those two ordinances. Staff is working on scheduling a date in consideration of the deadlines for agenda items under our new open government standards, which can push things out considerably. We anticipate the earliest we will see this item would be in late June or early July. And so we look, as soon as we can get that on the calendar, we would be bringing that back to council for that full discussion. And we also, PLAs were also on our project labor agreements, were also on our agenda. We met for an hour and a half and had to delay that conversation, knowing full well that it could very well take at least a full meeting, if not more. And we will be pushing that item to our May agenda. So my thanks to the subcommittee and to all those that participated this morning.
Great, thank you so much, Councilmember. Are there any other Councilmember reports? Councilmember Schwedel.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. And I don't have any other reports. I'm just going to accept the invitation to talk about this situation that our community is dealing with and has been dealing with last Thursday. So let me just start. I'm not going to talk specifics about what was in the article in the San Francisco Chronicle that came out on Thursday, other than the survivors have my unconditional support. And we as a community are very fortunate to have organizations such as Verity, YWCA, and the Family Justice Center for support. So those members of the community, and I've talked with many of you, if you're looking for someone who can support, find out how you can support some people who've found themselves in those horrific situations, contact those agencies and they can definitely support. And lastly, I'd like to speak directly to the Mayor of Windsor. Dominic, if you're listening to this, it's time to step down. I'm asking you to voluntarily step down. It's clear to me the impact that this has had on the community. You can no longer effectively serve as mayor. Having recently served as mayor, in the amount of collaboration, when I came to Dominic last year at the beginning of COVID, that we need to start meeting on a weekly basis to get together because we're all dealing with the issues. And I know Mayor Rogers is continuing that. The mayors are meeting on a weekly basis. All mayors are together. And in my experience in government, cities have never been so united as they are now. Well, they're also united in one thing, asking for you to step down. You no longer can be an effective mayor in the town of Windsor. And please, I'm asking you to step down for the benefit of all of us. Thank you, Mayor Rogers, for providing us with this opportunity.
Thank you, Councilmember. Councilmember Tibbetts.
Thank you, Mayor. Tom said it well, and I want to echo his comments in calling for Dominic's resignation. I can't imagine what the residents of Windsor are going through right now, and certainly, obviously, the survivors. You know, I think I felt like everybody on Thursday, you know, probably at first disbelief, how could this be happening? And then that pit in your stomach after reading repeated alleged accounts of similar behavior that to me was premeditated in many cases and very predatory. And it left me with a pit in my stomach. It also sent me into a state of deep reflection as well about our culture and how we teach our kids about consent. And it's hard for me now as a new dad to not really look at it from that lens. And in thinking about it going forward, when he gets to be older and of age, I want to have a really meaningful conversation with him about the importance of affirmative consent and what that means in creating safe spaces in the community for him and everyone around him. And so I know that now is a time for healing. I think that going forward, there needs to be a lot of conversations, not just about how the city handles these things internally. And Mayor Rogers, I thank you and I applaud you for starting that conversation with the city manager. But also, how do we change the culture around, you know, what immediately comes to my mind is, you know, for many of the men in this forum, you know, making the move. How do you make a move? Well, that's always, you know, what I reflected on is that's the wrong way to look at it. It's how do you have the affirmative consent to engage as consenting adults? And so I hope that we all have conversations about that in the future as well and how we shift the culture.
Thank you, Councilmember. Councilmember Alvarez.
I also want to echo what's just been said about both asking for Paul to resign, and it's really surprising to hear that he's actually resisting such a call, especially collectively from the different cities. And moving forward, you know, we have another issue in the city of Sebastopol. What do we do when someone's left office? And what mark do they leave, and how do we erase the ugliness that's attached to that individual? For me, it's definitely about the action of how we carry ourselves as men. And I'm absolutely for lack of better words, I cannot wait for us to have this conversation on how to hold each other accountable. Maybe, and I pray that this never happens amongst ourselves, but towards the future residents of Santa Rosa, how do they know what we expect of them as well? What structure are we going to put inside? And I'm really desperate to have this conversation with ourselves, because we are the leaders of our community, and what tone we set amongst each other is hopefully the expectation that our residents will also follow. And with that being said, for Polly, the day's up. I don't know what you're still doing there, brother. It's time to go.
Thank you, Councilmember. Councilmember Fleming.
Thank you, Mayor, and I do appreciate your impeccable leadership in the wake of the revelations about the alleged allegations last week and going into the weekend. I've had so much to say and overwhelmed by how many thoughts I've had about this and my own experiences, and just how challenging and exhausting it is to be a woman in this culture. And I just want to share with you all that this doesn't start in adulthood or even at the age of consent. And I think it's wonderful to have those conversations, and I commend you for thinking about that. But this starts, when we decide whether or not we want to find out the gender of our baby, and how we treat a child from their very earliest days on this planet. I can't adequately describe how early this indoctrination of gender and privilege that goes along with it gets conveyed to a young person, and the sense of entitlement and how that influences our processes and how these things are covered in the media. I mean, if you look at our own local newspaper, there's been criticisms about how this didn't get covered, but then nobody really looks at the fact that who on the editorial, who of our editorial columnists are men? Do we even have any editorial columnists who are men? I'm not talking about anybody on the editorial board, though we have nobody permanently on the editorial board who's female either. I mean, over and over and over in our old Press Democrat offices, 24 of the 25 people pictured in the entrance were men. I mean, we have a culture wherein, in order to get anywhere, and this is my own experience, you have to be pleasing to men. You can't just have a perspective or an opinion that is your own. You have to have an appearance and an affectation that is desirable to cisgender men. And if I had $1 for every person who wanted to sleep with me, in order to, when I had to campaign, I mean, I get overwhelmed with the frustration and anger of having to be pleasing and desirable in this manner to move forward in this arena. And I really believe that it is not on me or the other women who are in this position to do this work. It is on you to ask yourselves why you have these all-male softball teams, why you go golfing with these guys, why you pal around with them, and then in hindsight feel that they're kind of jerky and ugly and don't feel comfortable with it, and then wonder why people don't come forward and why we have this rape culture, which is what it is. And the other thing is that this doesn't exist in a vacuum. You don't get away with this for 2 decades without people around you who've had some idea and protected you in some way. And I'll stop myself before I keep going, because I could hold the council up all night. This is profoundly disturbing to me. And I hope that you use your positions of power and privilege, and not just in relation to being a father of daughters or a husband or a boyfriend or something like that, but as a human being, to hold other men who hold the same spaces as you do in white male cisgender spaces and in other spaces that you're allowed to occupy that I am not, to very seriously condemn and change the culture and make space for those of us who are not allowed in those rooms to set policy. Because if you continue to behave in the ways that you're behaving and allowing for this behavior to exist, then we're not going to get very far. And to those of you who are in the process of changing, I am so grateful. And I commit to doing the work as well to change the ways that I have been complicit in our white patriarchal system and the ways that it has harmed other women and people of color. Thank you.
Thank you, Council Member. Vice Mayor?
Mayor and other mayors for the other cities, I just want to thank you guys for coming together. I want to thank my fellow council members. When I'm at a loss for words, I think that that is more of a problem for me than when I am boisterous, because some things hurt on a different level. So for all and any victim of sexual assault, my heart goes out to them. As a woman, I feel like sometimes we go from being a victim of something or of anything to being the villain, and people try to change it to what did we do wrong? Did we wear the wrong dress, perfume? Were we flirty? Or there's just so many things that try to get pinned on us instead of just hearing. And so what we have to say. So I think that it is very brave and courageous when people come forward. I am disappointed at not just the police actions. I'm disappointed to know that it could have come to light a long time ago. I'm disappointed to hear what's going on in Sebastopol. I'm disturbed by people wanting to put things under the rug. I don't think it's acceptable. You know, I can say I haven't made a social media post, or I haven't done anything as far as social media is concerned. And one might question that, but I think everyone has their own journey, and different things hit a little harder, and people can read into that what they want to read into that about my past. But I am definitely in solidarity with any victim of sexual assault. So I'm saying it now. My heart does go out to you, and thank you, Tom, for notifying the public that there are, you know, organizations available to help. And I just, you know, my heart goes out to you guys. So sorry for everything that has happened, even though I was not involved. I feel as a society and as a leader now in the community, we're all involved, and how we go forward says a lot about what we're willing to do and how we're willing to support people during these times. So thank you.
Thank you, Vice Mayor. One of the discussion points that the mayor's group has been having is how to move forward if the mayor of Windsor chooses not to leave office. And I will just give this group heads up that we have determined that we will not work with him. We've asked him to not come to those meetings, and we have asked the town of Windsor to send a different representative if they'd like to be involved in regional issues. And I'm being upfront and disclosing that to you because I know that there will be folks who will question the harm that it could do to our constituents to not have a unified front on some of our most important issues. And I'm just telling you all, I have made the determination, as have other mayors, that what harms our constituents more is to normalize someone staying in office when they are unfit to serve. And so that is the tack that I will be taking. If council members have a problem with that, please feel free to reach out to me and talk to me about it. But I think that we have a very unified front in how we're going to proceed. And with that, I'm going to go ahead and stop and turn it over for public comment for council member comments. If there are folks who would like to speak, go ahead and hit the raise hand feature on Zoom. And I'm not seeing any. Madam City Clerk, did we have any pre-recorded public comments?
No, we did not, Mayor.
Okay. I'll bring it back. Any last thoughts from council members? All right, then we'll move on.
A hearty thank you to you, Mayor, for your leadership on this.
All right, with that, we'll go on to item 11, approval of minutes. We have 3 sets of minutes, and we already heard that Councilmember Tibbetts will be recusing himself from item 11.3. Were there any amendments needed for any of the 3 listed minutes? Okay, seeing none, we'll see if there's any public comment on those. And again, I'm not seeing any hands raised. Madam City Clerk, did we have any pre-recorded amendments to the minutes?
We received no written or voice message public comments on the minutes.
Okay, without objection, we'll show those adopted as written with Councilmember Tibbetts recusing from item 11.3. Mr. City Manager, our consent agenda.
Yes, Mr. Mayor. Item 12.1, resolution, professional services agreement with Opticos Design Incorporated for a missing middle housing initiative. Item 12.2, resolution, First Amendment to professional services agreement F002105 with B2K Social Ventures, LLC, DBA, Third Plateau Social Impact Strategies. Item 12.3, resolution, approval of the 8th Amendment to General Services Agreement with Day Management Corporation, DBA, Day Wireless Systems for maintenance, repair, inspection services for existing communications equipment. Item 12.4, resolution, supporting submittal of a grant application to the U.S. Bureau of Reclamation's Water Smart Grant Opportunity small-scale water efficiency projects to support the ongoing cash for grass rebate program and committing any necessary matching funds. Item 12.5, resolution authorizing the filing and execution of an application for federal funding from the Quick Strike program and committing any necessary matching funds. Item 12.6, motion, revision to resolution number RES-2021-052, which authorized certain city staff to enter into agreements and execute other documents with the California Housing and Community Development, HCD, for CDBG projects, CDBG DR and CDBG MIT, developed in response to the 2017 Tubbs fire to include total allocation of CDBG funds.
All right, Madam City Attorney.
Thank you. Yes, I had, before you discuss and vote on the consent calendar, I just want to make 2 notes, note 2 items. They are both with respect to item 12.6. As the city manager just read, this item concerns a resolution that's required by the California Housing Community Development, HCD, in connection with the allocation of grants to the city under the CDBG DR and the CDBG MIT programs. And the city is in place for a total grant award of almost $34 million. So 2 notes. 1, you may have noticed that the item is asterisked on the agenda. That is because this item did not appear on the preliminary agenda for today's meeting. And that is because the council had previously adopted the initially required resolution on March 23rd. And it was a few days after that that HCD did request that the resolution be revised to expressly include the dollar amount of the allocations. And they asked that revision be made by April 23rd. We received the request after the preliminary agenda for today's meeting had already been posted. So we request that as set forth in the staff report and in accordance with the council's early agenda policy, that before taking action on that particular item, 12.6, that the council determine whether there's good cause to nevertheless consider the item today, despite it not having been placed on the preliminary agenda. The second issue that I want to note again with respect to that same item, 12.6, after publication of the final agenda and the revised resolution in accordance with HCD's first request, we did receive a new request from HCD to once again revise the resolution. So that revised resolution in red line and in clean copy have been provided to you, to the entire council, and also has been made available to the public online. So when you address item 12.6, if you would specifically reference that it is this final revised version that was posted this afternoon, that is the resolution that you are approving. So again, those two items, good cause and the revised resolution. Thank you.
And there is some screaming going on from staff right now. You may not be able to hear it, but it is there.
I can appreciate that, Mr. City Manager. I'll see if council is interested in putting a motion on the table to add this formally to the agenda. I see Councilmember Sweathelm's hand popped up first.
Yeah, I'll make a motion that council does find good cause based on the information just provided by our city attorney regarding the timeliness of the HCD request, that we do consider this item as item 12.6 on tonight's agenda.
And that's the newest update, correct?
Correct.
All right, so there's a motion by Councilmember Sweathelm, a second from Councilmember Sawyer. We'll go to public comment really fast to see if the public has any feedback on that motion. And seeing none, let's go ahead and call the roll on the motion.
Councilmember Tibbetts?
Aye.
Councilmember Schwedhelm?
Aye.
Councilmember Sawyer?
Aye.
Councilmember Fleming?
Aye.
Councilmember Alvarez?
Aye.
Vice Mayor Rogers?
Aye.
Mayor Rogers?
Aye.
That motion passes with 7 ayes.
Great. Now let's go ahead and get a motion on the table for, or first, are there any questions for staff on the rest of the consent calendar? Councilmember Sweathelm.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I have a question on item 12.5. And so, Mr. City Manager, you can pull who you want. My question is, the staff report indicated the minimum local match was 121K, but did not mention what the maximum match would be of the TDA funds. So I'm just interested, what would our exposure be on the high end, not the low end?
I see Rachel has popped on, and so I will turn it over to Rachel.
Yeah, so we have pledged to match those funds with $122,000 in TDA funds, which is exactly at the 11.47% required local match for the project.
So the way the staff report reads, that's the minimum. Is that what it's going to be, or is there a maximum? Is 122K the maximum?
That's the minimum and the maximum. So
Great.
We're not pledging any additional funds to the project.
Great, thank you.
You bet.
All right. Any other questions, council? We'll go ahead and go to public comment, see if there are any public comments for the consent calendar. Seeing no hands, Madam Zoom host, did we have any pre-recorded?
No, we did not.
Great, then I'm looking for the Vice Mayor to make a motion.
I move items 12.1 through 12.6 and waive further reading of the text.
Second.
Motion by the Vice Mayor, second by Councilmember Tibbetts. Let's call the roll.
Councilmember Tibbetts?
Aye.
Councilmember Schwedhelm?
Aye.
Councilmember Sawyer?
Aye.
Councilmember Fleming?
Aye.
Councilmember Alvarez?
Aye.
Vice Mayor Rogers?
Aye.
Mayor Rogers?
Aye.
That motion passes with 7 ayes.
All right, and we'll go on to our last item for the evening. It's our public comment for non-agenda items. If you have an item that you'd like to bring up with the council, go ahead and hit the raise hand feature on your Zoom. Or if you are on your phone, hit *9. All right, let's go with Gregory. All right, Gregory, you should be enabled to speak now.
Of course, once again, greetings. My name is Gregory Farron. I'm once again trying to juggle something I wrote up in order to be able to present to you from my email. At the same time, I'm still learning about Zoom. Not on the agenda today is your choice to close encampments to those who seek refuge from the harshness of their lives on our streets. Not being discussed today is how to lead the homeless consortium of care to bring all resources together, including what the county and the city will share with each other, to express what you think is needed and what works. And when necessary, what our city is prepared to do with its own funds to fill the gaps in care you become convinced exist. Weekly, I'll be here to provide you with ideas that could end up on your agenda and to give you the praise you deserve when your actions help move us forward. Movement that we can measure easily, clearly, which amplifies options, strengthens lives, and which makes us all proud of living in Santa Rosa. It's clearly not easy being leaders. Thank you for stepping up to the task.
Thank you, Gregory. Next up, we have Alex.
Can you hear me?
Yep, go ahead, Alex.
Hi, Mayor Rogers, council members. I just want to give you a little update on the small cell situation. Apparently, AT&T has submitted new applications. Most of them were within a few blocks of each other on West College Avenue. One on the corner of Fulton and West College was submitted on April 5th. And there's already a Verizon small cell tower on that corner, overhanging, I think it's Copperfield residential neighborhoods. One about a block away in between Stony Point and Fulton, another small cell submitted, or that was an old application, but they're actually doing construction on that site right now, and that's overhanging several homes. And then another application, which is not too bad of a spot, over across the street from Finley. And then another one further down West College. So 4 small cells submitted, applications submitted by AT&T this a couple weeks ago. As Gabe and the city staff are working on a policy to regulate these companies, it's my understanding that Gabe is also talking with them and going over the policy with them, which I don't find very appropriate, especially since there's a hearing with AT&T coming up on July 7th, I believe it is. So, you know, we're negotiating and going over a policy with the companies we're supposed to regulate. And this is just an example of why people are losing trust in government, because it's big industries and big companies who are dictating through advertising and connections, lobbying, what technology and what's best for us. And I'm going to tell you right now that these people on West College are not going to appreciate, again, not being properly notified, having a cell phone tower placed next to their home. And this is not about the digital divide, right? These homes already have cable infrastructure that'll give them gigabyte data into their homes. So I just hope that Vice Mayor Rogers, you're aware of that, because that's in your district, and these people will be notified by our group very shortly here about these new applications. And I just hope that they are aware and we're notified properly, right? We've talked about this for a few years now. Let's get the process fixed. And yeah, it's just a shame. I walk my dogs. I live right next to that neighborhood, a couple blocks away, and I walk down that area, and it's depressing for me. So anyways, thanks for listening to me.
All right, thank you, Alex. Madam City Clerk, do we have any pre-recorded voicemail public comments?
No, we did not, Mayor.
Okay, then with that, that's the last item on our agenda for tonight. Thank you, council members. I'll see you next week. We are adjourned.